Then, ladies and gentlemen, running a little bit behind schedule there. I apologize for my tardiness, ladies and gentlemen. We Atlanta traffic, trucks breaking down in the middle of the highway, tow trucks blocking off traffic. It was a nightmare, but the Rates and Lanes podcast, we are here and we ride again. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. If you guys would please like, share, and subscribe to the video. Like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And hit the little bell notification beside the subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. That helps us get into the algorithm and lets you get notified whenever we drop any new content or whenever we go live or any of that stuff like that. So if you would do that for us, we greatly would appreciate that. Tonight, I'm not going to belabor the point and drag it out a lot. I'm going to welcome my co-host in, and we're going to welcome in. And after we welcome Chuck in, good evening, Chuck.
Hey, how are you, Rico? I'm glad you finally made it, buddy.
Hey, we're coming around the pike, through the woods, all the way to Grandma's house, I think.
If you need a minute to go shut your truck down, let me know and I'll.
Man, I thought I was going to be doing the show from the truck tonight, but it started getting so dark early. Now it would have been really difficult to pull it off. But I don't want to belabor the point. I want everybody to help us. That we got a few people that have joined us, but I want everybody to help us out in welcoming our resident legal expert and wishing him a very, very, very happy birthday. Our resident legal expert, Mr. Hank Seaton. Good evening, Hank. How are you? And happy birthday, my friend.
Happy birthday,
thank
Hank.
you. It was yesterday, and it was very uneventful. I had a pleading to file with the agency to tell them how screwed up they were.
Man,
what a horrible way to spend your birthday.
Yeah, well, I had plenty to say.
Cheers, nonetheless. I'm drinking ginger beer for you.
Cheers. Mine's non-alcoholic. I don't know about Rico's.
Good to be with you guys.
So, Hank, I got a few questions, but it's been a little while since we've had you on. Please catch us up as to what's going on Capitol Hill and all of the drama and stuff that we may have missed out on. Where are we with all of the different regulatory issues?
Yeah, a lot of things between I'd say July and the past 2 weeks kind of came to a screeching halt because Congress was so dysfunctional. Our effort to do something about getting DOT to do some enforcement on fraud kind of came to a screeching halt. There have been a lot of trade organizations that are working on new vetting programs, and some of those vetting programs are certainly not things I could recommend, particularly for smaller new carriers. There's one service that's being sold, and it's adopted by a trade association. They say that no shipper or broker should use any carrier who is not been rated often enough in SMS to prove they're actually operating on the road, and or who's been in business less than 6 months. Now, that kind of standard, if applied, could very well mean that RICO doesn't cross enough scales to get measured, hasn't had any wrecks, and so since he doesn't have enough data to measure by, people would say, well, gee, maybe he's a chameleon or whatever. But your access to the freight or the access of the 100,000 new people coming in is then affected because they're new. Right. And one of the reasons they're affected because they're new is because the FMCSA does zero before they give them authority to vet them. There's supposed to be a new carrier audit that we're suggesting, and with Rick Gobble's help, it presented to both FMCSA and DOT, that says, look, it's kind of like you have a CDL driver's license. If you don't have a driver's license, you can't get behind an 18-wheeler.
Right.
Similarly, if you're going to be a truck company owner and you're going to get a license, i.e., a certificate, during that 25 days that they're auditing you or that you're waiting for a protest, they ought to at least get Google Map out and see if where you say your home office is actually in a dairy field. They ought to do some checking in terms of a simple new carrier audit. It says, hey, look, it's kind of like you need to sit down in a controlled environment and take the test. And if you need to prepare for the test, get your act together. And they're going to be given in a kind of like the old ACT. It was given three times a month at a school near you, but get some kind of test done so that they can come out and say, yes, this guy that got started has been vetted, and he gets a rating of continue to operate. Now what you get is you start operation. The website says you're unrated. And Plato's bar says, hot damn, this guy's unrated. That means he's unrated and the FMCSA hadn't done anything to check him out. Then I guess the shipper should have to pay if he hits a school bus. So I think you can see, if you follow my line of thinking, that it's the fact that they've got the new carrier audit but don't use it. It's the fact that they play right into plaintiff's bar's hands by saying you're unrated. And it's also because they keep touting the idea that SMS works, that plaintiff's bar makes it competitively disadvantaged for new people. You guys all pay more insurance rates than the driver deserves. If Rico was getting in the business new and he was rated as fit to operate, Rico could say, check out my MVR, buddy. I've been operating for 10 years. I know how to truck, and hadn't hit anybody yet. But you don't get that opportunity if you're a refugee from the owner-operator system. So I think you can see, if you follow me through, that we've got a hard job because the agency has announced that they're going to reboot SMS. They're going to go back to SMS methodology, and they're going to use it to replace an objective audit. And that's something that responsible people, regardless if they're my term's two truck Charlie, that's the term of affection. If they're, regardless of whether they got two trucks or whether or not they're a huge broker dependent upon people with two trucks, we ought to all say, give us a safety rating.
Right.
Give us a safety rating. If you got to go and prove that in order to get behind the wheel, you can handle one of those doggone big rigs, then you can prove that, I don't care whether it's a wife or who it is, but you got somebody in management that can figure out what paperwork is needed, how to measure it, how to run a lawful operation. So that's my preaching for the night. But the real key coming down the path is the agency, after it stopped in 16. This is 23. By my count, that's 7 years. For 7 years, they've done nothing to try to change SMS, but let it run in the background. And as it's run in the background, they have been able to give safety ratings to fewer and fewer carriers each year.
Right.
So each year they give safety ratings to about at maximum 12,000 carriers.
Out of how many?
700,000.
So let me ask you a question. Could they, I'm a solution guy. Okay. And that's how I built, that's how I started our company, and that's how I built it. And to this day, I'm always looking for solutions. If I had to fix this thing, all I would do is say, okay, do you want to be a carrier? You got to be audited after, 60 or 90 days, and it's going to be X number of dollars. and the government can make some money on it because it's still going to be a hell of a lot cheaper than it used to be back in the day when you had to run up and get authority and have, dozens of guys like you, Hank.
Look, we've already got that. And they say it works. You pay $400 for it, but they only promise it to do it within the first 9 months, and they're behind time. What I'm saying is,
so charge $800 or $1,200 and get it done. Hire people.
Look, if it is a dollars and cents thing, it's chump change compared to the damage that's being done by the other thing, and we can get into that. But what I'm saying isn't. I was talking to a bunch of small carriers the other day, and they said, "Well, gee, we need. Do we need to wait off a while to do the audit?" And I said, "Look, don't give me a learner's permit. Don't give me say, well, look, you can start operating, but you're not going to be treated as equal with somebody else until you've gotten the CDL. And the CDL for a carrier is this new carrier audit. Right. Now, if they want to say you're perfectly fit, but within a year we're going to come back and kick the tires on something, I'm perfectly happy with that.
Well, yeah.
But all I'm saying is they have got to understand that to give small and new carriers an even chance, they've got to be determined to be fit to operate, and that has to be fit to use. Because they've been running this SMS in the background now for 7 years. And what has happened? C.H. Robinson and all the big boys are getting tattooed with all these $80 million judgments. Yep. Okay? And, on this, I'm looking at the Nasdaq's Man of the Year broker, and you know doggone well that the brokers, the big issue is a red light, green light.
Yep.
And I'm saying that the state does its job when it gives an audit and green lights you. Now, if you're a driver and you start hitting everything on the road that tests positive for drugs, then they blank.
Well, yeah, but the rules are there before the guy. That rule has been there for 25 years. That you cannot take intoxicants and drive a truck, and it's fair. That's the law.
I understand that, and yes. All I'm saying is, what has been the law for well over 40 years is the current safety fitness rating, which admittedly is cumbersome and admittedly has some defects in it.
Right.
But in the current safety rating, you get an on-site audit. There's a record made of your violations, and you get you get an appeal. But it's not like an SAT or like a horse race. You come in second or third. It's a pass, no pass situation. And what I'm saying is the CDL is a pass, no pass situation. The new carrier audit is a pass, no pass situation. And if it only costs them $400 a day to run it, that's about let's say that's a day of a retired inspector's time. Put 2 of them on it. I don't care. But I'm saying it's chump change if it in turn lets the new carrier get $1,000 off his insurance, because now he's got a safety rating.
Yeah. It goes a long way.
That's the big issue that really we're trying to get traction with, because the agency just brushed that aside like a horse taking its tail and hitting a fly. They just didn't even look at it.
They don't want to hear it because
no. But part of the reasons I don't think they want to hear it is they've got this outfit called Volpe, which is in Massachusetts, and which does all of the heavy data mining for them. And I think that we've gotten to the stage in life where everybody that works for the government believes that somehow let's get human error baked out of it. That somehow everything can be done mechanically easier.
Well, that we all know that's not true because you know, it just can't be, and you need both. Um, you know, they've come up with these automatic braking systems. I'm sure you guys have heard about it, and some of the drivers that have experimented with it said it's great until the darn thing comes on its own, and the brakes apply for no reason.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, a lot of that stuff, a lot of that new technology may be good, but it's got to be alpha and beta tested before you say that we're going to lay all of our money down on this thing, you know?
Yeah.
I give you an example. I was writing this thing about the pleading that was due. We can go into that on my birthday, but it was very clear that the way they were going to pitch this was we're going to get the data, quantity of the data, enough data so that we'll be able to measure everybody. Now, if you start thinking about that, and everybody involved, some guy in Oregon who's driving over the mountain pass or whatever it is to uh, Idaho every day and never crosses a scale.
Right.
How are you ever going to get it on him?
Nothing.
I mean, you know, if you're trying to say we're going to get enough quantity data to accurately measure everybody, then you got to be looking at getting the smallest, most remote carrier by an electric reader, what, 5 times a month? And then you got the question about, well, you know, what if that one's out for a week? Just the same thing as we have now. That, well, gee, if you have to run by the I-24 scales or the Giles County state scales, they're out to fund the local funds, and you know some of them will tell the guys coming across the scales, man, you better sit here a while. I haven't found anybody who couldn't put out a service today. I mean, it's prosecutorial abuse, you know, and it's the fact that you know in Texas they're looking for equipment. In other states they're looking for other things. So there's no objective standard. And they're not planning on putting that in any way I can see. But that may be enough of that.
It sounds like, you know what? It sounds like the fox is running the hen house here, or the inmates are running the asylum.
Well, I got a friend here who told me that the first rule of bureaucrat in any agency was they were weebies, and that stood for we be here long after you're gone. And it's kind of an idea that you know if there's a trend going on, they can just kind of wait you out.
Right.
And you know, most of the lawyers that I know that are getting into transportation law don't understand what the old rules were before 2010.
Right.
And Hank,
they certainly don't understand. ICC. Yeah.
Rico? I didn't get a chance to before I got to introduce y'all. I got to rushing, but I keep it right here on my desk. I looked over there and I saw it. So ladies and gentlemen,
all right.
Make sure I'm going to do this again. I'm going to plug this again at the end of the show. But Hank has a book. I call it the Bible. I call it the Bible of trucking.
It is.
You if you don't have this book, go to Transportation Law. I'm gonna put that in the chat. www.transportationlaw.net. You can order it from there. But the book is called The Rules of the Roads: A Practical Guide in Issues and Truck Transportation. And I tell you, this thing is packed with all types of stuff. And I got a couple of questions that I definitely want to hit you with, Hank. Probably a little bit of a couple of redundant questions, but questions nonetheless.
Ask away. I preached enough. Ask away.
And I want to give the listeners, and I want to give everybody that's tuning in, if you got questions or anything like that, if this is your first time tuning in and you're checking us out, this is Hank Seaton. Hank Seaton is a transportation attorney. I'm a little bit biased. I'm gonna say the best damn transportation attorney that it is in the industry.
I think a lot of us agree with that.
While we still,
Thank you. I'm quickly getting to be the oldest practicing one. So
that's why you're the best, because you have the
that's right.
experience.
Seen it all, done it all. So
if we drink a beer and you ask me, can you top that one? Probably is. I've got one that's worse.
So if you guys out there got questions, if you got a question, anything dealing with it, whether if it's got anything to deal with contracts, anything like that, legalities of trucking, you can type it in the chat. We'll make sure that we weave it into the conversation and get your question answered for you. Probably the only time and the best and the cheapest legal advice you probably can get.
Yeah, definitely.
But good.
I appreciate all the accolades, but when you say and he's the cheapest, I don't know what that.
No. I say that in the sense of Hank doesn't charge us a dime, and he's been so gracious and generous over the years to come over here and join us on the show. Like I say, I call him my resident legal expert, because Hank normally joins us at least maybe once a month, if not more sometimes. And just depends on what's going on. And he's so gracious with his time and knows his stuff backwards forward. I mean, you can wake him up in the middle of the night, 2 o'clock in the morning, and he could probably tell you exactly what, if you needed to find something, what page to find it on and everything like that. Hank is one of the best in the business. So I say that affectionately. Please go out and support Hank. Go grab the book. If nothing else, if you got any contracts that you need to have done or anything like that, him and his team over there, they are great. They've done stuff for me before in the past, and looking forward to try to hopefully maybe get involved with them again. But with that
let me take your kind words as a launch pad. I've never tried to market anything on our time together, but I got something that I think probably needs marketing. As part of the whole fraud issue, what's going on is you got to have two things to operate. You got to have insurance and you got to have agents. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, insurance has gotten to be the home of a lot of fraud. There are a lot of scuzzballs who are making filings on insurance that either doesn't exist, or fraudsters are insuring one truck and then acting like they're running 20. And that's an issue, that if you're purchasing insurance, first of all, you got to be sure you got the right coverage. And that's particularly important in terms of cargo. Right. And if you are a broker and you're looking for somebody else, you got to realize that on cargo, he may only have one truck insured and he may operate 10. So I'm just saying that in purchasing cargo, you got to be smart in terms of knowing what you're getting, who you're getting it from, and then when you're brokering freight, is his insurance for real? Because if all they've got is what they call a certificate of insurance, it has very little use. Very little use. There's fine print in it that says that the agent's not making any warranty. So if the agent is a scuzzball, you're going to have some underwriter say, well, you didn't buy the coverage. And then you're going to have to sue the agent if you can find him. So number one, insurance is a large part of the theft, and you need to be sure you're doing with somebody that's reputable. I tried to grade out insurance carriers one time, and I had a whole lot of people that said, we don't want to tell you what our policy says, read it. And it's 73 pages long, and what was given to you on the first 5 pages was taken away with a rider at the end. And the rider was called the endorsement, but it just took everything away. So number one, insurance is one thing that plays into fraud. But the thing that I've got a selfish motive for is the second one is a little used operation. It's called a BOC3. You got to have it. It's a designation of an agent in each state. The reason it exists is so that the public wouldn't have to go chase RICO to sue him if RICO was involved in an accident in Colorado. Somehow they had to get access to drag RICO to Colorado, so because he's doing business there, if he's running his trucks out there. So RICO has got some guy providing him with blanket coverage, and they're providing him ostensibly with somebody in every state who can send something to Crescent in care of Don Dollinger. And it'll be served on Don Dollinger, and he'll reach out and take responsibility to find RICO. Okay, well, it's been a little used, but now it's getting used a whole lot more, because when you get in a jam and you got to go find a fraudster, you need to be able to sue his agent. And then if he's missing in action, you can get a default against him.
Right.
But to get his agent, you got to be able to find him.
Right.
And unfortunately, in the system the way it is, there used to be 65 people doing this. Today, I think there may be 58 because the agency's putting them out of business. Traditionally, the agents for service have been people who used it as a loss leader. So they would see somebody new getting into business, and they'd say, we'll sell you agents for a one-time fee, but we want to do your permitting work or something else.
Right.
So that's a loss leader. And if you look at the list of folks that do it, most of them start off with 1A plus something, or they're all at the front end of the alphabet because they're just proving for people who are going on the website.
Right.
Because hey, it's a $50 one-time fee. What the heck? Well, the what the heck is getting to materialize itself, because the agency, as a result of some of this fraud stuff, begun to realize that there were 200 identifiable crooks operating out of the same office in Sheridan, Wyoming, as one of these process agents who had 32,000 people in the road, and it's empty. Okay, so somebody got embarrassed about that and started looking at it, and the agency slowly going through and saying everybody who's doing this has got to recertify that their agents are live, that they're real people, and it's not a mail drop. Well, sooner or later they're going to stop dropping out like flies, because you would like to think that whoever is going to handle your legal papers is going to be a lawyer. Okay.
Right.
That may be something that I heard, Hank, not to interrupt you for a second, but I heard someone in a conversation. I didn't get a chance to really get in depth on it, but they were talking about how DOT is starting to crack down on people that are using virtual offices.
Yep, that is it. Now, listen, here's the rest of the story. For 40 years, I have operated a company called Service of Process Agents. I put it together back in the old days when you had to get intrastate authority and everybody knew lawyers in every state. So I've always had all lawyers. Okay. And it's worked as a referral network. Right. I mean, if I've got a buddy in St. Louis, I will refer him a case if it comes up. I go first to my people as a referral service. And if they call me and say, Hank, who's your agent in Nevada? So for me, it's a placement service. And so what I'm trying to do, since I know the agency's out here looking at all these folks, is to say, hey, now's the time to upgrade your service rather than have a mail drop that is just a remote post office that nobody's at. or some of these people name themselves in all states. Go to somebody that can give you the assurance, has a lawyer in each state that'll do it, that'll help you. I say that because I'm the only guy that's got it right now. But in any event, uh, I would urge people that probably don't know who they've got, but if they want to send me a note, I'll take a look at it and tell them it's really humorous, guys. Uh, it reads like the Dead Poet Society. I can take a look at them and see the list of guys that I know have been dead for 10 or 15 years. They're still on the list. I mean, at some point you just have to laugh about it. DC was a hard place to get somebody, and there was an old lawyer named Fritz Kahn, and
Right.
Fritz been dead. He's been dead for at least 5 years, and there are at least 5 or 6 people that have still got him listed.
Man.
I know I know. I don't know who this dude is, but I can tell. I can tell exactly what happened because I had a good friend that lived in the same town I did in Maryland, and I needed somebody in Maryland. The guy's name was Joe Whaley, and Joe passed away 10 years ago, and he's still on some guy's list. So, I mean, you can laugh about it, but I mean, I'm not really trying to be particularly predatory about these folks. But some of them just move around to the point it's hilarious. And I don't know when the agency is going to have it done. They said last December they wanted everybody to certify, and we're now in the following November, and a lot of people haven't done a thing.
Right.
So if there's anybody out there, just for grins, tell them to go get their list. It's easy to go to the website, put in the name of the guy that they've got as their registered agent, drill down and look at the list of people that are serving. I mean, some of them don't even make a pretense for having a lawyer. It'll say that it's ABC Investigating Service, or the names themselves don't even really suggest that they're anything other than a live individual, but in many cases they aren't that. We tried to serve some of these guys registered mail, and they undeliverable.
Now,
So,
if they're operating though, Hank, do they by law have to accept service if they are operating? They do, don't they?
well, here's the way it goes. My group has never been sued, but I have had situations in which we made service on an individual because we, in a state, we knew that we couldn't find the defendant, so we sued the agent. And then, of course, the agent came into the court and he said, "I've done my best. I can't find him." And then at that point, we say, "Well, Your Honor, we need a default. We need a default against this guy because, we sued his agent. They can't find him." Now, sometimes, of course, a court, if they're lenient, will say, "Well, gee, Mr. Seaton, this is Nevada. Why don't you try to long arm him and go to Chicago and find him?" At which time we said, "We've already been to Chicago, Your Honor. He ain't there." But I mean, the reason that this usually doesn't percolate up is that, if I get somebody who's on the list and he says, "Look, Hank, I can't find him," or whatever, then I'll go and try to locate him some other way. But then I want to be able to tell the court, "Look, I need a default. Guy was under a legal requirement to designate an agent who knew where he was. He lied on his application. He's not there. It's closed." Now you say, "Well, why am I doing all of this? If he's gone, am I ever going to get any money?" And the answer there is you got to be prepared then to go after the individual under, one of the self-help things that says the individual's liable. So many people just say, "Oh, what the hell? You know, he's a crook. He'll never catch it." You have to be willing to connect the dots to do that.
Right, dot the I's and cross the T's. That's
Yeah.
that's a
I
critical
mean,
point.
look, I think the traditional thing, I think people have gotten fed up, but the traditional thing is, hey, be a realist. You know, if you're a large guy, you can take a $500,000 hit and not be ruined. But to tell some guy who's looking, you know, he's been crook for 20K and can't make payments on his truck,
Yeah.
you hate to say, well, nothing the legal system can do for you.
Yeah, because that
Particularly
20,000
when
can break them.
there is this way just to ratchet it up, and there are getting to be some really slick people
Oh, yeah.
that we're working with that can use something called open contracts, and you know they can immediately data dive on every company in the country through the Secretary of State and see who incorporated it where he said his home business. So I mean, you know, there are techniques that we're learning now, other than just saying, well, you know, America's like being dropped in the middle of the Amazon and nobody can find you. They're working at finding people.
So Hank, a couple of questions. First off, with MAP 21, they took away the ability for motor carriers to do interlining. Is that correct, or is there still kind of a loophole where motor carriers can still interline with other motor carriers?
This is a very misunderstood situation. What they did was they said that unless the motor carrier handled the shipment portion of the way, shipment had to be handled through a brokerage. So that if I am a traditional, like in the air freight industry, you have a line haul carrier that picks it up at the airport and takes a whole consolidated load to Nashville and then gives it to a delivery truck. Well, now in that case, somebody like Ford Air can handle the delivery truck because they handled it part of the way, and it's an interline, not affected by MAP 21. But the trick with MAP 21 and the fact that the FMCSA doesn't understand the difference between co-brokerage and double brokerage is that the law says that if I'm Seaton Transport, I can have a dual broker and carrier license. But I have to tell the customer that, oh, I'm putting my excess capacity on somebody else. And here's who's picking it up. Because what happens is the big carriers will say, well, we do that to protect our brand. Yeah, how does that work when you got your name on the bill of lading and then you get sued for the accident? It's bad business. But the preferred way, for at least from my point of view, is to say, hey, look, I'm going to act as a freight forwarder. My name's going to be on the bill as a freight forwarder. And when you give it to me, you know that you can turn to me for the cargo claim, and I'm going to hire the subcontracting carrier. I'll tell you who's going to pick it up. That's legal. A lot of brokers, if they do it right, want to be sure they get their name off the bill of lading as a carrier. Okay, so they want to design a bill of lading that says to Mr. Brokered carrier and to Mr. Shipper, load confirmation sheet, make it out Seaton Brokerage is the payee, sign section 7. I'm going to give you the name of the pickup carrier. You be sure that he signs the bill of lading and the name on the bill of lading matches the name on the door. Now you get a whole lot more sophisticated. You can get 15 pages in it. But if you get over this little game being played with Amazon and some other folks, right, they don't even want to know the name of the carrier. They won't even let you put it down there.
No, a lot of plants will not. like, cause I know myself, I've gone into a place to load and they hand me they hand me like a JB Hunt or a yellow or a Werner bill of lading or CP Express bill of lading or whatever. And you cross it off, you put traffics, and the guy says, no, you can't change the bill.
Right.
No, you can't do that. So, you
Well,
run into that too.
Well, look, what you've got to do is you have got to tell them that you cannot, under the regulations, commit fraud.
Right.
That under the regulations, whether this is a brokered load or whether it's based upon your tariff, you have got to issue a receipt for the possession of the goods so that nobody's going to stop and tell you that you've stolen the load.
Right.
It's just like a warehouse receipt.
Yeah.
It is evidence that you are lawfully in possession of the load. Now, I've had that for
And
years.
if I remember correctly, just to throw another little caveat in here, I hope we're not convoluting the matter for everybody that's listening in with all these technicalities. But isn't the motor carrier responsible for issuing a bill of lading anyway?
Well, yes, you got two things going here. Number one, you don't have to issue a bill of lading anymore.
Delivery receipt.
There's so many contracts out here, and the contract trumps the bill of lading. And from the point of view of most shippers, they may think they do, but they don't want a straight bill of lading because that makes them primarily liable for the load, notwithstanding the contract.
Right.
So what they want is maybe a VIX bill that just has a front side and says origin, destination, shipper, and amount.
Right.
But from the carrier's point of view, you want the governing document to be. You may have a master contract, but you want the fact that you're coming up with a rate to be that load confirmation sheet that incorporates your service terms or something else you've agreed to, but which identifies the load, the origin, and with the bottom on the notation of it, no carrier to execute shipping document at point of origin. You ain't gonna get paid. Somebody else picks up this load. Because when you stick it in their face, if you're a broker, then the chances are they're going to go find some other schmuck. Because if they think that the consignor is looking for that, they'll stay away from you.
Here's another thing, Hank. With technology, I mean, when we first met and when we kind of first started having these conversations years ago, Hank, and we would always tell people, get the contract, red line the items in the contract that you have in the book that you talk about that are in the book and things like that, the deadly dozen. Now, pretty much everybody has gone to a system to where if you're gonna get freight, it's basically an electronic document. They basically pull you up, and you either there's no ability.
No, there's no negotiation. It's
Right.
an MRIS or My Packet contract, right. And they look just alike.
Exactly.
And whoever drafted them was practicing law of the jungle, which basically said you're going to need this load bad enough. You're gonna swim the Atlantic Ocean and promise to deliver it tomorrow. So I mean, it is a question, and the first point people say is everything you say, Hank, would be in our best interest, but I got to have the load. Well, I perfectly understand that, but let me tell you what I've tried to tell broker clients. You want to get something come back and bite you in the butt, you put that in there.
Right.
Let me give you a couple of examples. I get all of these shippers who want the carrier to warrant that they've got certain satisfactory safety ratings. Who've got the carriers to warrant a whole lot more than they're licensed, authorized, and insured. The carrier can't begin to meet it. And then where it meets the shipper is if the dude has a wreck. And plaintiff's bar looks at that contract and says, look, you control this dude. You weren't just some guy walking into Walmart buying something. You told him that he was going to make this delivery on time, or you were going to reject it. And he went through a school zone 5 miles for a late delivery and hit a bunch of kids. And that was because you were monitoring every step of the way. When you get into up supply chain liability and unionization and other little nasty words we really don't want to talk about, control is the issue. And in a pure transaction, when I go out by Southwest Airlines, I can shop for the price, but I know that FAA registered, and I don't have to give the pilot a breathalyzer. If I were going to go out and contract for a charter, it might be different. But from a shipper and broker's point of view, they want to be able to go out and hire a carrier as if it were a public utility. The fact that they're able to operate means somebody has looked at them and they're safe. All the airlines have, by international convention, a maximum amount that they'll pay for cargo.
Right.
You cannot, if it comes in by an air destined to Nashville and it's trucked from Atlanta up here, then it's worth $12 a pound. Okay.
Because it's on an airline bill of lading, correct?
Well, yeah, it's gone on the airline bill of lading, but it's a matter of commerce law. The fact that it's on the airline bill of lading doesn't matter. It's the intent of the shipper for it to move in interstate commerce. But you're absolutely right in this case in terms of the release rate. But the shipment, I just was asked this in a blog, and that was, when does a local move between the same 2 points in the same state become interstate? Now, on that, the issue is if you bring me a load out of Toronto land and you drop it off at my dock in Nashville and I take it to Memphis, even though I don't cross the state line, it's an interstate shipment because the intent of the shipper was known when it left Toronto. Okay. Now you're probably pretty good and right that an airway bill would help it, but when you get a situation in which Delta Airlines hires you to make the move from Nashville to Memphis, we would say it's still the Warsaw connection rate. But I'm saying when you get out of those niches, everybody else has a limit on liability except in truck transportation.
Right.
I've got cases in which carriers improvidently signed contracts for brokers with unlimited liability, and they got sued for $20 million.
Whoa.
Jeez.
And what happened was the load was a load of pharmaceuticals.
Right.
That had always had a contract that was limited to 250. The client had 250, but unlimited liability was put in a new version of the 20-page contract, and the customer wasn't told.
Now, did the carrier sign this?
Well, what happened is
if it was that electronic deal, you don't.
This really wasn't electronic, but this was the renewal of a contract between a traffic department and a prime service provider. And the traffic manager says, oh, look, the rates are going to stay the same. They just want you to sign a new contract. Okay. Now, look, that one ended up working out well because we shamed the pharma company. But you know who sued us? the insurers for the pharma who paid the $20 million.
Sure. They want their 20 million bucks back.
They wanted their subrogation rights.
Right.
And to get a policy that big, the pharma people had 7 insurers writing it.
Yeah.
And so you tell me, I hope you go to trial because I want the jury. I want to say, you mean to tell me we got 7 insurers trying to get this money back, and they're trying to take it out of this little guy who for years bought an excessive amount of 250? This is crooked, But that's just an example. I've had them go into Mexico, in which the contract was written in the U.S. and made no allowance for the fact that the insurance in Mexico is not worth anything.
Right.
So if it rolls in Mexico, it's probably 4 cents a pound, but in this case, they wanted $1 million.
Now, speaking of Mexico, they have to, if on a load going into Mexico, the insurance provider has to change once it hits the Mexican border, correct? And the Mexican insurer provides insurance.
Yeah, that's usually the way it goes. Of course, who provides the insurance is different from what the state law is with the amount.
Right.
Under NAFTA, if it originates in the U.S., it's assumed that that liability continues into Mexico. If it originates in Mexico, it should be assumed that the liability, the Mexican liability, it goes through. So that's the reason you got a contract around it. But
Right.
Mexico is so well developed that the carriers down there are able to say it's based upon the average payroll rate of somebody in Mexico City. But when you work it out, it's like 3 or 4 cents a pound. But then they all have in sliding scales for purchasing excess liability. Okay, so in the case I had where broker wanted $1 million, my guy was actually at the border doing transloading and just passing on the cost for Mexico at cost. And when they tried to get nasty about it, we said, hey, now look, if you want to sue us, we're just going to go back on all of those loads that we billed you the cheaper rate we got, and we're going to ask the Mexican carrier what he would have charged to have provided you with this $1 million you now say you want. We did the calculation and said, look, sue us if you have to. We're going to countersue for the Mexican cost of providing that service. Didn't go anywhere. But I'm just saying, guys, that these kinds of things are lethal. One thing we started like, there is a thing down here that's coming through that may be a sleeper. It's called the Joint Employer Status legislation. Our NLRB has just come down with a ruling. We opposed it and everybody else did. But the ruling basically says that for organizational purposes, the employer may not be the only one that can be organized. That if there is somebody who controls the operation of the employer, he may be able to bring the folks into the bargaining group. You follow me what I'm saying?
Yep.
In the old days down here, you couldn't get into an automotive plant unless you were a Teamsters or had a UAW.
Right.
Okay, so that made it difficult for an owner-operator fleet to get in unless you
didn't have the union card.
Yeah, but now under this new thing, it's a 90-page decision. I haven't thoroughly digested it. Nobody has, but it seems to say that for purposes of union bargaining groups, there'll be a control test that'll work something like this. If you've got indicia of control in your contract with your vendor, that says that you're doing something other than buying something FOB its origin, those are going to be looked at as control factors that might bring those truck drivers into the bargaining group, Ford or GM or the broker. So I mean, you know, the thing there would be, and I'm just kind of teasing this out. What would happen if well, first thing is if you look at all the people that are doing power only,
Right.
okay, you know, the argument could possibly be made that this guy who's fighting hard to be an independent contractor and has got a sweet power only deal with a major carrier
Right.
has to be subject to the major carrier's bargaining group because the major carrier provides the trailer and tells him where to go from point A to point B. Also interesting would be at what point the shipper or broker is shooting themselves in the foot by demanding more from the carrier than a common carrier is required to provide.
Right.
So reject it, crush it, and dump it. That's a special requirement. It's not enforced as a matter of law.
Right.
But now you have told the guy what he has to do with the salvage. Is that a control issue?
Absolutely.
Sounds
Well,
like it's
if the judge and jury's an NLRB in the Biden administration, you know what they got right. So I'm just saying that, you know, here we are in a dysfunctional Congress. That bill that I'm talking about, the NLRB thing, came down in a 100-page decision. We opposed it. ATA opposed it. We were just lost in the heather of it. They didn't even discuss trucking, but it was 100 pages long, two versus one in terms of the decision, and there's all this gobbledygook in it. And the way it's set up is it's supposed to go into effect next month, unless Congress intervenes. So we've been working a little bit with the SBA, and we just Me Too'd everything they said because they realized how this would apply across industries.
right.
Now they're frauds. Hey, look, you know, we've always had this kind of rent a driver fraud. You know,
Right.
where a guy was just he was just a paper payer. He might have provided workman's comp, but otherwise he was a funnel through which you hired your own employees. I'm not supporting that. I'm just saying at some point, if you're running a shuttle operation and a dedicated operation under this, you may be looking for a friendly union to join.
Got it.
I remember the days when the Kroger company, you know, the largest
Right.
food house, if you wanted to serve Kroger, you had to have a union card.
Of course.
And it was just a question of finding which local to pay your dues to that would leave you alone. And I think that's the new view of America. And of course, what it's going to do, and you all mentioned it earlier with the loss of the overtime exemption, it's going to make labor too expensive to hire. And similarly, it's going to make the cost of goods go up. So if everybody else has to get the increase just to put the same food on the desk, and now all you've done is get more incompetitive with stuff coming in from Vietnam. I mean, I don't see it helping.
Yeah, no, this is, you know what, it's like a train wreck with this overtime for long distance truckers without being able, especially for the people operating trucking companies, not being able to collect. Like you've got to lay that money out. You know, your driver is, you know, gone to the West Coast and back and hits a snowstorm or hits something, and you've got to pay all this extra. Where does that money come from operating a truck?
Yeah,
the labor costs.
All this stuff is gonna. I don't know. You know, we're gonna. It's becoming really, really difficult, really, to even try to figure out pricing to get, because unless we're gonna just pass everything on to the consumer, and at some point, I mean, there's a point where the consumer can only bear so much. They're only going to pay so much for a gallon of milk. So
Yeah.
You talk about you talk about that. Let me give you guys a really bad situation. I do some stuff on import, okay? And when all of the boats got backed up, uh, the carriers in that industry all made it very careful because per diem at the ports is such a big deal that don't give me any MRIS, which I guarantee the damn thing's going to be unloaded. I'll set the appointments, but if it doesn't get landed or get to your dock, we're going to pass through to you any steamship line per diem. And the steamship lines want $100 a day for their box. Why? Because it's the law of the jungle. Well, now, as all this happens, even though the drayage industry has got thousands of carriers in it, and they're loosely organized, they basically all hung to it. So what ended up happening, I do stuff with the furniture industry. That cheap stuff that was coming in for China was a low margin stuff to start with. It set out in the beta the point of view that the per diem far exceeded the value of the furniture. So now, after the season's over and the stuff gets landed, the warehouses are full of seasonal furniture that the manufacturers are upside down on.
Right.
And, they're yelling and screaming. But from the carrier's point of view, why in the hell should he be accountable for the union not wanting to work at the Port of Long Beach?
Right.
But in our ordinary truckload freight, it's the other way around. Unless you got an act of God defense, got reasonable dispatch, you probably set a contract that promised it was going to be there next day. If you didn't meet the morning market at Hunts Point,
That's it.
Right. So many questions, so little time, Hank. I definitely appreciate. We might have to double back up on you. And
I think so.
Back on here.
We got to talk more about this. We really have to get.
There's a lot of stuff. We didn't even get a chance to scratch the surface. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the fraud thing, because our guest last week we talked a lot about how pervasive the fraud problem has gotten within the industry. And
who did you have with you last week to talk about that?
Jeff Hull. He's a private investigator and security expert.
I don't know. I don't know him. I'm going to be doing a series of webinars to these little trade associations on this. I like your format. Let's talk, because the fraud issue is it's hard to hold a coalition of people together. And they are pointing fingers at one another. Right now, it seems like the big issue is everybody wants to point the fingers, and at the end of the day, the big guys want to say it's the little guys that are undercutting the prices that are doing it. The brokers want to say, well, we'll just have to put in more rigid guidelines, and the big boys are getting creamed, but they don't want to admit it.
Well, he was explaining to us, like it's a lot of majority of it is of course organized crime, and you got a lot of people that are out here that have jumped into this industry that are doing these quote unquote dispatch services and things of that nature that don't have any kind of real official formal training or any industry experience. They've gotten certified through social media. And it's become a real problem. But I guess we'll try to organize and catch up with you and see how soon we can get you back on, Hank, so we can.
Okay. Well, look, the other thing is, before we go off, people need to know that we have got a couple of legislative things you ought to be looking at. We'll be making comments before December 1. On this reboot idea. And, if after being told no for the past 14 years, the system doesn't work, we're going to tell them that, basically, how do you think you're going to change it? Are you going to put, it looks like something like stationary readers just to assign penalties for violations? I think they think it's kind of like the reader will be able to, in like a Wi-Fi, take a download from the truck. And that'll be a download that will show the guy's facial stuff. It'll show his ELD. It'll match up the VIN number of the truck with who's got it registered. I mean, the kind of things they're talking about, truck drivers are going to have a real problem.
Yeah, because then it sounds like, especially with that, with all of the identity theft and all that other stuff. I mean, you got all your personal information that could be subject to be compromised in a situation like that.
Oh yeah, you compromise that is really kind of the tip of the iceberg. There are certainly legitimate reasons why a guy has to go and get a substitute truck for him. Now,
right.
The problem that they've got is this thing we commented on the other day was an appellate process, and they want to say, well, we're doing you a great job because we're going to give you a third level of appeal. But when you get the third level of appeal, you're going back not to an ALJ or a dispassionate finder of fact, but you're going back to the very the very government people who cited you for the violation to begin with. And if you file the appeal, guess what you can't contest? Guess what you can't contest? The facts. On appeal, you can't contest the facts. You got to have some novel position of law. So I mean, now they have got something off of a electronic reader that there was nobody putting any. Just when the hard data got to Washington, that the fine was fixed. And when you look at the numbers, they say, well, gee, we think this works because particularly data queue. You know what data queue is?
Right.
That's the idea that we think the data queue will work just fine with 3 levels of appeal because really now only the big carriers are using it and they're having a 65% success rate. Well, our response is there's a reason only the big carriers are using it. They can't afford to.
Right.
The little guy's got a fender bender, and he's very happy that he's not going to get sued because he's got a personal injury. So it's not going before a judge. If he wasn't written a ticket, then he doesn't have to show back up in Podunk. So he's probably just going to let it ride. Now what you're going to do is you're going to increase the amount of data 10 times and tell him that his future safety existence is dependent upon it. What's that going to cost him?
Yeah.
Totally.
I tell you, it's hard. It's hard for the little guy. It's hard for the but thank goodness we got.
But listen. They're getting to be some people, little guys in this that are not trying to curry any favor with the FMCSA about this. I mean, it's gotten down to where it's cutting through the fat to the bone. I think we'll just have to see how it plays itself out.
Well, as always, Hank, thank you again for taking the time out to come and join
us. Oh, sure. I've enjoyed it, guys.
We definitely are appreciative for you doing so. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, you can grab Hank's book. I put the website right there on the screen. You can go there to the website and you can order the book there. You can get your copy. Mine is well worn. You can see it's, it doesn't look all that pretty anymore, but I tell you, it's definitely worth you having it at your having it accessible to read and know, be aware. Being aware is a lot of
one more shameless plug. If there's anybody on here who's interested in checking out their agents and thinking about changing, I'll probably throw a book in if it becomes a service.
That's generous.
Well, there you
Okay,
go.
that's a little ticer, you know.
Very
There
kind
you
of you.
go. So with that being said, also if you need Hank's services or anything like that, that's the place to contact him. That's the place to find him and his team over there at transportationlaw.net. There's a lot of information that Hank has already up on the website and stuff of that nature. So there's a wealth of information right there on that website as well. Anything that I'm forgetting, Hank, before we get out of here?
No, there's a lot more we could talk about.
I know we got to have you on soon because this is.
All right.
We got to get you back on soon, Hank. We're gonna give them.
I enjoy it. This is therapy for me. So
we got to give them bite size, Hank. We don't we give them a little the appetizer. We're gonna bring you back.
No, I don't want to add to people's misery. Good Lord, there are people that are worse off than we are, but it's a brave new world out there, guys.
It certainly
I've
is.
enjoyed it. What is it? Keep it between the mustard and mayonnaise.
Yeah, we getting ready to get to that in just a second. Chuck,
Okay.
Let the people know how they can find you and get on.
Yeah, if I can help any of our listeners, please contact me, chucksnow280 at outlook.com. Put your phone number on the email. Tell me what you need, and I will do anything I can to help you. And with that, Rico, I'll let you back her in a hole for another week. Hank, thanks again for joining us.
Enjoy it, guys. Take care.
As always, ladies and gentlemen, we want you guys to stay safe out there, stay healthy. And as always, keep it in between the mustard and the mayonnaise. God bless you and good night. God willing, we'll talk at you same time, same place next week. Thanks again, Hank.
See you guys. Bye-bye.
Catch you on the flip flop.
Good night.
On the flip flop.